I want you to picture a very specific scene. Just close your eyes for a second. Well, unless you're driving, obviously.
Right. Keep your eyes on the road if you're driving.
Yeah, definitely. But otherwise, just put yourself in November of 1986. You're in Newtown, Connecticut.
Which is a very specific kind of place, especially back then.
Exactly. I mean, if you were to walk down the street on a Tuesday morning, you'd see exactly what you expect from an affluent, safe, perfectly ordinary New England suburban town.
Yeah, massive colonial homes sitting back on manicured lawns.
Right. And there's frost starting to form on the windows. The last of the autumn leaves are crunching underfoot.
Maybe a yellow school bus turning the corner.
Yeah. It's the kind of place where people move specifically.
Yeah.
Because nothing bad ever happens there. It's insulated, It's secure.
It projects this image of total stability. I mean, it's the kind of community where the biggest neighborhood scandal is usually like a property line dispute.
Or someone parking too close to a driveway, right?
Exactly.
So, now I want you to imagine what the perfect crime looks like in a place like that. And I'm not talking about a crime of passion where someone just loses their temper.
Right, not a heat of the moment thing.
No, and not a burglary gone wrong either. I want you to picture a meticulously planned, flawlessly executed, completely invisible crime.
A crime engineered to leave absolutely zero trace.
Yes. And then I want you to imagine how you would feel if you slowly start to realize that someone in your own home was the one planning it.
Oh, wow. That is a profoundly chilling thought.
I mean, someone you shared a life with, a bed, children.
Because we are biologically wired to view our homes as our ultimate sanctuaries,
Right.
To realize that the person sitting across the breakfast table from you pouring their coffee is actively and methodically engineering your disappearance. It shatters every fundamental assumption a human being has about safety.
It shatters your whole reality. And that terrifying realization is the starting point for our deep dive today.
It really is.
We are opening the case file of Helle Crafts. And let me tell you, the stack of sources we have for this, I mean, the trial transcripts, forensic journals, investigative reports.
It's massive.
It reads like a documentary thriller. But our mission today isn't just to tell a true crime story.
No, we're doing much more than that.
We are going to unpack how a carefully constructed, quote-unquote, perfect murder was completely dismantled.
And dismantled in a way that nobody saw coming.
Right. Because the wildest part of this entire stack of research, it was dismantled by a combination of microscopic science and the absolutely extraordinary foresight of the victim herself.
Which is why we need to look at the broader implications here. I mean, this isn't just a story about a tragedy in Connecticut.
It's much bigger.
This case is a profound inflection point in the evolution of the American justice system. Specifically, it forces us to examine a concept called corpus delicti.
Okay, corpus delicti. What does that mean exactly?
In legal terms, that translates to the body of the crime. And for centuries of legal history, judges and juries took that phrase quite literally.
Meaning, if you don't have a physical body, you don't have a murder.
Exactly. But this specific case pushed the boundaries of what that phrase actually means.
How so?
Well, it required a massive, unprecedented leap in how we understand evidence, how we prove a crime, and how we deliver justice when the physical body has been intentionally, systematically wiped off the face of the earth.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really want to understand how we get to that legal threshold.
We have to start with the people involved.
Right, because before we get into the sheer mechanics of the crime, the sources make it incredibly clear that we have to understand who Helle Crafts was.
Her personality is the key to everything that follows.
Her specific background, yeah. So, I see she was born Helle Nielsen in Denmark in July 1947.
Yes.
How does a childhood in post-war Europe shape someone who ends up in an affluent Connecticut suburb?
You have to think about the cultural context of post-war Copenhagen. I mean, Europe was rebuilding, right?
Yeah, a lot of transition.
There was a sense of optimism, but it was grounded in extreme pragmatism. The Scandinavian culture, she grew up in places of very high value on independence.
Independent stoicism, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And rational problem solving. We see a pragmatism in her that is completely woven into her character from a very young age.
So she wasn't just going with the flow.
Not at all. She wasn't someone who waited for things to happen to her. She was active, not passive.
I definitely noticed that in her career trajectory.
Yeah.
Because by 1969, she joins Pan Am as a flight attendant.
Which was a huge deal.
Right. For anyone who doesn't remember, Pan Am in 1969 wasn't just hopping on a budget airline for a weekend trip.
Oh, no. It was the absolute pinnacle of international luxury travel.
And the selection process was incredibly rigorous, wasn't it?
Highly rigorous. I mean, they were looking for diplomats of the sky, essentially.
Diplomats of the sky. I like that.
Yeah, women who were educated, poised, capable of handling international crises, and deeply worldly.
And she was flying the big international routes, right? Frankfurt, Copenhagen,
Yeah.
London.
Exactly. And she was completely fluent in Danish, English, and German. Plus, she was conversational in French and Spanish.
It's 5 languages. I mean, she is navigating different cultures, different time zones, dealing with high-profile passengers all the time.
She was a fiercely independent woman of the world.
So then fast forward to 1975, and she meets Richard Crafts. I'm assuming, given her background, she wasn't easily impressed by just anybody.
No, she wouldn't have been.
So what was the draw with Richard?
Well, on paper, Richard matched her worldly persona perfectly. He was a pilot. He traveled internationally.
He had that sort of authoritative vibe.
Yes, a very calm, commanding presence. So they married. They settled down in that large colonial home in Newtown we were just picturing.
And they have 3 children, right?
Yeah.
Andrew, Thomas, and Christina.
That's right. And outwardly, if you were a neighbor looking over the fence, is the absolute definition of the American dream.
But the sources show that the foundation of that dream was basically hollow.
Completely hollow.
Because Richard was systematically unfaithful. And I'm not talking about, like, a one-time mistake here.
No, this was a pattern. He had multiple affairs simultaneously.
With other flight attendants, right. And with women he met through a side job he had.
Yes, he was very brazen about it, in a quiet way.
And the thing that stood out to me in these files, Helle knew. She actually knew about it.
She did. And this is where Helle's Scandinavian pragmatism, that highly analytical nature we mentioned, really comes into play.
How so? Because a lot of people would just explode.
Right. If you look at standard domestic disputes, a lot of people in that situation might react with explosive public drama.
Or they might just pretend it isn't happening.
Exactly. They retreat into total denial just to preserve the facade of the suburban dream, for the sake of the kids.
But Helle didn't do either of those things.
No. She analyzed the situation like a problem that needed a logical solution.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Because that sounds so clinical.
First, she tried the conventional routes to fix it. She sought couples counseling. She spoke privately to her pastor.
So she treated it as a breakdown in communication first.
Right. But when she realized it couldn't be fixed, when she realized Richard was entirely deceptive, she took decisive, methodical action.
She didn't just threaten to leave. She actually started building a dossier.
Yes, she hired a private investigator.
Keith Mayo, right? In the summer of 1986, she hires this guy to document Richard's affairs.
Which is a very bold move.
It is. She's not just throwing accusations around the kitchen during an argument. She is gathering physical, usable evidence.
And by October 1986, she is consulting a divorce attorney, Diane Anderson.
But here is the quote from the sources that literally made me stop reading. It gave me goosebumps.
I know the one you mean.
She was talking to a friend of hers, Marie Thomas, and Helle says, "If anything happens to me, don't think it was an accident."
It's a chilling level of self-awareness.
It really is.
She understood the true dangerous nature of the man she was dealing with long before local law enforcement had any clue.
I really want to push back on the standard true crime narrative here, because usually in these kinds of files, the victim is portrayed as completely unsuspecting.
Right, the helpless victim caught off guard.
Exactly, caught off guard in the middle of the night. But Helle was actively outsmarting her killer before the crime even happened.
She was.
It's almost like she was leaving a living will for a murder investigation. She knew she was in danger, and she essentially scattered breadcrumbs for the police to find later.
What's fascinating here is how her behavior drastically altered the trajectory of the entire case.
Because of all the documentation.
Yes. In criminal psychology and victimology, we don't just study who the victim was. We study how their choices intersect with the crime itself.
Oh, that makes sense.
Think about what she accomplished. By documenting Richard's infidelity with a licensed investigator, by officially consulting an attorney, by vocalizing her fears to multiple friends,
To track them.
Helle completely removed Richard's ability to play the grieving, confused husband.
Because the motive is already on the public record. He can't just be like, oh, I don't know why she left.
Precisely. Before she ever went missing, she established a motive, a suspect, and a timeline of marital deterioration.
Wow.
She built the foundation of the prosecution's case while she was still alive.
Which means she knew exactly who she was dealing with.
Mm.
And to understand why a worldly, capable woman was so intensely afraid of her husband, we have to look at Richard Crafts.
We do.
Yeah.
His background is highly unusual.
I was reading through his resume, and it is definitely not your standard suburban dad resume. I mean, he was born in 1937 in New York.
Right.
He becomes an Eastern Airlines commercial pilot. Yeah. That's the respectable, visible front.
The cover, essentially.
Yeah, because then I saw his previous employment. He flew for Air America. What is Air America? Because the sources hint that this is the key to his entire psychology.
It absolutely is the key. Air America was not a standard commercial airline, and it wasn't some quirky regional carrier.
So what was it?
It was a covert front operation entirely owned and operated by the CIA.
Wait, really? So we are talking about a guy who flew covert operations for the CIA in a war zone.
Yes. They were primarily active during the Vietnam War era, flying highly classified missions in Southeast Asia.
I had no idea. What kind of missions?
They were dropping supplies to covert forces, extracting intelligence assets, flying into incredibly hostile territory where they officially, legally did not exist.
That is wild.
And the psychological profile of the men recruited for Air America is deeply specific.
I'm assuming you can't just be a good pilot.
Exactly. You aren't just looking for good pilots. You are looking for men who possess an extreme level of self-containment.
They have to be cool under pressure.
Very cool. They have to have a certain comfort with violence and danger. But most importantly, they are selected for their ability to practice absolute airtight compartmentalization.
Compartmentalization. Meaning like the ability to put different parts of your life into different mental boxes so they never touch?
Exactly. Former colleagues described Richard Crafts as emotionally opaque.
Opaque. Like a brick wall.
Yes. He was a man who revealed absolutely nothing he didn't intend to reveal. I mean, if an engine catches fire over a jungle where you are taking anti-aircraft fire, panic will kill you.
You just shut the emotion off?
That emotional opacity is a survival trait in covert operations. You must be able to sever your emotions from your physical actions completely.
I mean, I can see how that keeps you alive in Vietnam. But when you bring that exact psychological profile back to a colonial home in Connecticut, that's terrifying.
It becomes suffocating in a marriage, and when you apply that covert ops psychological profile to a domestic dispute, it becomes lethal.
Because he doesn't see domestic dispute as a normal argument.
Right. He had the ingrained state-sponsored training to view a human being not as a partner, a mother, or a person with rights, but simply as a logistical problem that needed to be neutralized and solved.
And as if the CIA background wasn't enough of an advantage, I saw he had another job. He was a part-time police officer with the Southbury, Connecticut Police Department.
Yes, he was.
I mean, was he just a guy directing traffic, or was he heavily involved?
He was a fully trained, active, part-time officer. And this is the multiplier effect in his dangerous profile.
Because now he knows the playbook.
Exactly. He wasn't just emotionally detached. He was technically educated in the exact forensic and legal systems that would eventually be used to hunt him.
He knew police procedures inside and out.
He knew the chain of evidence protocols. He knew exactly what crime scene investigators were trained to look for when they walked into a room.
So he knows they're going to look for blood spatter, signs of forced entry, trace evidence on carpets.
Yes. He knew how detectives think. He knew how warrants are obtained. He knew the legal threshold for an arrest.
I mean, that is like having the answer key to a test before you even walk into the classroom.
It gave him supreme confidence.
He wasn't guessing how to get away with murder. He was operating with insider knowledge of how his colleagues would grade his crime scene.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But surely, being a cop himself, he knows that the husband is always the prime suspect, right? He knows they are going to search his house eventually. How does he plan to explain a missing wife?
This raises an important question, and it points directly to Richard's fatal flaw, his staggering arrogance.
Arrogance.
Yes. He designed this crime specifically to defeat a standard, by-the-book police investigation.
So he was gaming the system.
He built a mental model of how his colleagues in local law enforcement would react based on what he had seen them do for years. He assumed they would follow predictable bureaucratic patterns.
Like checking boxes on a form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The standard operating procedure for a missing person case in the mid-1980s was pretty straightforward.
Which was what?
If there is no body, no weapon, and no physical crime scene in the house, there is no case.
So their hands are tied.
The police might suspect you, but they can't arrest you. He planned for the bureaucracy. He didn't plan for someone to step outside of that box.
Well, let's look at the plan he put together. because calling it a plan almost feels too mild. We are looking at the architecture of a cold-blooded mind here.
It was incredibly calculated.
According to the timeline, in the weeks before the murder, he goes shopping. In October 1986, he buys a large chest freezer.
Right.
He buys a heavy-duty chainsaw. And strangely, he keeps the receipt for the chainsaw.
He does.
Why would you keep the receipt for the murder weapon? That seems like a mistake.
Because in his arrogant, compartmentalized mind, hiding the purchase makes it look suspicious.
Oh, I see.
A suburban guy buying a chainsaw in the fall to cut firewood is perfectly normal. Keeping the receipt is part of building an innocent alibi. It's reverse psychology.
Wow. And then he makes plans to rent an Asplin Badger Brush Bandit 100 wood chipper.
Which is not a standard piece of gardening equipment.
Oh, it's massive.
That is a massive industrial machine capable of processing 12-inch tree trunks in seconds.
So he's escalating.
The escalation of those three specific purchases, a freezer, a chainsaw, an industrial wood chipper, it shows a terrifyingly clear, linear thought process.
It's just a to-do list for him.
This wasn't a sudden snap of rage during an argument. This was project management.
So we get to the night of November 18, 1986. Helle returns home from a flight to Frankfurt.
Yes.
It's a Tuesday, and there's a major winter storm moving into Connecticut. She gets home. Now, there are obviously no eyewitnesses to the exact moment of the murder.
No, it was just the two of them.
But the forensic evidence later pieced together that she was murdered in the master bedroom. Investigators found spots of type O blood, her blood type, that someone had desperately tried to clean up.
And the location is psychologically significant.
Why the bedroom?
The master bedroom is the most intimate space in the house. It's where someone should feel the most secure. To violate that space requires a total detachment.
It's an ultimate betrayal.
But what he does next strips away any remaining shred of humanity from the event.
I was reading the timeline, and there was a gap between November 18 and November 20. What is happening during those 2 days?
The logistics of his plan.
The sources say he puts her body in that chest freezer he bought, and he just leaves her there with the kids in the house.
Yes.
The level of detachment there is almost inhuman. Is this a common psychological profile in homicides?
It is incredibly rare, and it is deeply disturbing. If you look at typical homicides, even premeditated ones, once the act is committed, the perpetrator usually experiences a massive spike in adrenaline and panic.
They want to run.
Exactly. They want to separate themselves from the victim immediately. They bury the body in the woods, they dump it in a lake, they flee the scene.
But Richard didn't run.
Taking the time to freeze the remains means you are willing to live in the house with the victim's body for days.
But why freeze the body at all? Why not just dispose of it that night?
Because of the gruesome physics of what he planned to do next. To put human remains through a wood chipper, they have to be sectioned first.
Oh.
If you try to dismember room temperature tissue with a chainsaw, it is chaotic, it is messy, the blade catches, and it leaves massive amounts of forensic evidence, blood spatter, tissue spray everywhere.
It's just a mess.
But frozen tissue cuts cleanly, like dense wood. It minimizes blood loss and makes the mechanical process far more efficient.
My God. That is horrific.
It is a horrific detail, but as an analyst, it tells you everything you need to know about his state of mind.
He's just thinking about the cleanup.
It was done purely for the sake of mechanical efficiency later. It is the absolute peak of that CIA-trained compartmentalization we discussed.
He turned a horrific act of domestic violence into an industrial meat processing operation.
That's exactly what he did.
That completely shatters the myth of the crime of passion. We always hear that phrase, right? He lost control.
This is not losing control.
No. This was the exact opposite of losing control. This was hyper-control. This was industrial logistics applied to a human being.
It's chilling.
So 2 days pass. November 20, 1986. It's 4:00 a.m. Richard rents that massive wood chipper from Darien Rentals.
Right.
He hooks it up to his truck, and he drives it to the Lake Zoar Bridge over the Housatonic River, and he chooses to do this in the middle of a blinding snowstorm.
He's utilizing the weather as tactical cover.
Smart, in a sick way.
In his mind, a blizzard at 4:00 a.m. means zero visibility and 0 foot traffic. Nobody goes for a walk in a snowstorm before dawn. It is the perfect isolated window for disposal.
But here is the flaw in his perfect plan. And it's the one thing he couldn't control. A snowplow driver named Joseph Hine is out clearing the roads for the county.
Yes, just doing his job.
And as he drives over the bridge, His headlights sweep across a man operating a wood chipper in the dark during a blizzard, shooting debris down toward the riverbank.
It's an incredible moment of serendipity.
It really is.
Richard could predict police procedure, he could manage the physical evidence in his home, he could utilize the weather, but he could not predict a municipal worker simply doing his job at the exact right moment.
And Joseph Hine thinks it's weird, obviously, but he just keeps driving.
Yeah.
It isn't until later, when the news of Helle's disappearance breaks, that he connects the dots and calls the police.
Thank goodness he did.
And the dark irony of all this, Helle had hired that private investigator, Keith Mayo, to build a file for family court. Richard's actions took that divorce file and handed it directly to homicide detectives.
He really sealed his own fate there. He thought the Housatonic River would act as a massive natural disposal system.
That was the idea, right? Let the river wash it away.
The plan was for the current to carry the microscopic evidence miles downstream, diluting it into the ocean where it would never be found. But the river had other plans.
What do you mean?
It comes down to environmental factors. We often think of rivers as these raging torrents that just sweep everything away instantly.
Yeah, especially in the winter.
But in November 1986, the Housatonic River was experiencing very specific conditions. The water level was running unusually low and the current was very slow.
Wow.
So when the debris exited that wood chipper, it didn't hit a rushing current. It settled softly right there on the muddy riverbank and in the shallow water.
Which brings us to the moment the entire trajectory of forensic science shifts. Because the snowplow driver's tip eventually leads investigators to that specific stretch of the river.
Exactly.
The local police realize they are way out of their depth. So the case lands on the desk of Dr. Henry Lee.
A true legend.
Right. For those who don't know, who was Dr. Lee at this time and what was his approach?
At the time, Dr. Henry Lee was the director of the Connecticut State Police Forensic Science Lab. He was already highly respected, but this case would make him a global legend.
Detective Michael Zane brings in this impossible situation, right?
A missing woman, a husband who is a fellow cop, no body, and a house that has been professionally scrubbed clean.
Sounds hopeless.
But Dr. Lee's response is a masterclass in forensic philosophy. He essentially says, get me the evidence you have. All of it. Every fragment, no matter how small.
So he didn't see no body as a dead end.
Exactly. Dr. Lee's approach represents a paradigm shift in forensics. He looked at the lack of a body as a puzzle with very, very small pieces.
Like microscopic pieces.
His fundamental philosophy is that violence always leaves an echo. Lockard's exchange principle dictates that every contact leaves a trace.
You can't just erase someone.
You cannot violently, mechanically destroy a 130-pound human body without leaving a microscopic footprint behind. It is physically impossible.
So in late December 1986, investigators go out to the riverbank, and the sources describe this absolutely grueling search.
It was incredibly difficult work.
You have state troopers and crime scene technicians literally on their hands and knees in the freezing Connecticut winter, sifting through freezing mud, dead leaves, and snow.
For weeks.
And what they find over the next few weeks is almost impossible to comprehend. The breakdown in the outline says they found 2,600 individual strands of blonde hair.
Yes.
But wait, how do they know it's her hair, or even human hair? How do you differentiate human blonde hair from deer fur or river grass under a microscope in 1986?
That is the genius of microscopic analysis. A hair shaft isn't just a solid piece of thread. It has a complex anatomical structure.
Like what?
Think of it like a pencil. The outer layer is the cuticle, which has overlapping scales. The middle layer is the cortex, which holds the pigment. And the inner core is the medulla.
Okay, so it has layers.
Dr. Lee and his team used comparison microscopes. When you look at animal hair, the medulla, that inner core, is very wide, taking up most of the hair shaft, and the cuticle scales are patterned very differently.
So it looks obvious under a microscope.
Human hair has a narrow fragment in medulla, and the scales are flatter. Furthermore, they could look at the roots.
What do the roots tell them?
Some of the hairs had been forcibly removed, while others had cleanly cut ends consistent with a chainsaw blade. They could confidently say, these 2,600 hairs are human, Caucasian, blonde, and match hairs taken from Helle's hairbrush at home.
That is mind-blowing. And it wasn't just hair. They found 60 tiny human bone chips.
Which is another incredible forensic feat.
Same question.
Yeah.
How do you ID a bone chip the size of a fingernail?
Similar principle. Mammal bone has a specific cellular structure, specifically the Haversian canals, the tiny tubes that blood vessels run through.
Okay.
The pattern and density of those canals in human bone are distinct from a deer or a dog. They also analyzed the cut marks on the bone fragments.
What did they find there?
They found microscopic striations grooves that perfectly matched the teeth of the specific chainsaw Richard had purchased.
Wow. They also found one tooth fragment, specifically a lower left bicuspid.
Yes, just one tiny piece of a tooth.
They brought in a forensic dentist, Dr. Lowell Levine, who was able to look at the x-rays from Helle's dental records and definitively match the root structure of that single tooth fragment to her mouth.
It's astounding precision.
They also found typo blood smeared inside the canopy of the wood chipper because Richard hadn't cleaned it as well as he thought.
He got sloppy.
But the most visceral, haunting piece of evidence, they found a single fingertip with the fingernail still attached, and it was painted with a pink nail polish.
That piece of evidence changes everything.
Dr. Lee's team took that polish, analyzed the chemical composition, and perfectly matched it to a bottle found in Helle's makeup kit back in her bathroom.
It's a staggering collection of evidence, precisely because of how small it all is.
It's microscopic justice.
You have to think about the meticulous discipline required to find a single bicuspid in miles of muddy riverbank. But if we connect this to the broader strategy of the investigation, the physical evidence at the river was only half of Dr. Lee's equation.
He didn't just stop at the river.
No, he also went back to the Crafts house.
Yes, the missing box spring. This detail feels like something out of a detective novel.
It really highlights his deductive reasoning.
Dr. Lee is examining the master bedroom. He sees the bed frame. He sees the mattress. But the box spring beneath the mattress is gone.
Which is highly suspicious.
If I'm a normal detective, I might just think they threw out an old piece of furniture. Why does this stand out so much to Dr. Lee?
Because in forensic science, the absence of an object in its natural environment can scream just as loudly as a bloodstain.
That makes a lot of sense.
Think about it logically. Why would a husband, whose wife is supposedly just missing, throw out only the box spring of their shared bed, but keep the mattress?
Right. If she just walked out the door, the bed wouldn't be disturbed at all.
Exactly. The logical deduction is massive, irreversible contamination. A mattress is usually covered in sheets, a mattress protector. It can sometimes be flipped or superficially scrubbed.
A box spring is different.
A box spring is essentially a hollow wooden frame covered in thin, porous fabric. If a large volume of fluids like blood seeps past the mattress and into the hollow cavity of a box spring, it is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to clean.
It just pulls in there.
By removing it and taking it to the local dump, Richard inadvertently confirmed to Dr. Lee the exact epicenter of the murder.
So let me summarize where we are. We have a guy who thinks he's an untouchable covert operative executing this flawless plan.
But his arrogance trips him up at every turn.
His credit card receipts ruin his alibi,
Yeah.
legally proving he bought the chainsaw and rented the chipper.
Yeah.
The missing box spring points an arrow directly at his bedroom.
Yep.
And Dr. Lee manages to find a microscopic needle in a muddy haystack after the needle has literally been put through an industrial shredder.
What this means is that Richard Craft's arrogance blinded him to the advancement of science.
He was living in the past.
He was operating on a 1970s understanding of what constituted proof. He thought without a recognizable, intact corpse, he was legally untouchable.
He didn't know what they could do now.
He didn't realize that a single bicuspid and a painted fingernail, backed by rigorous scientific methodology, could be just as legally binding as a full body.
But proving that in a high-tech lab to other scientists is one thing. Taking that into a courtroom and proving it to 12 regular people on a jury is another universe entirely.
It's the ultimate test of the evidence.
Which brings us to the legal battles. Richard is arrested in January 1987, and the prosecutors are facing an absolute mountain. No one in the entire history of Connecticut had ever been convicted of murder without a corpse.
The legal precedent simply wasn't there, and the defense attorneys knew it.
What was their strategy?
Their strategy was built entirely on weaponizing reasonable doubt. They didn't have to prove Richard was innocent. They just had to prove the state couldn't definitively say it was murder.
Because they didn't have the body to show the cause of death.
Their argument was essentially, finding hair and bone chips doesn't prove murder. It proves Helle might be dead, or it proves she was in a terrible accident. But it doesn't prove how she died.
And it doesn't prove Richard caused it.
Exactly. Not beyond a reasonable doubt.
That feels incredibly cynical. Like, come on.
It is cynical, but legally it's a highly effective defense when a jury has been conditioned by decades of television and courtroom drama to expect a traditional crime scene.
They expect a body, a smoking gun, a clear cause of death.
Right. They want the neat package.
The first trial happens in June 1988 in New London, Connecticut. And it is an absolute marathon. We are talking 52 days of testimony.
Exhausting for everyone involved.
The prosecution comes in swinging with a heavy science. They put Dr. Lee on the stand. They go through all the data, the hair cuticle analysis, the bone fragmentation patterns, the microscopic striations.
All the highly technical stuff.
And what happens? It ends in a deadlocked jury. A single holdout juror absolutely refuses to convict because there is no body.
Just one person.
The judge has to declare a mistrial. How does one person derail 52 days of scientific proof?
That mistrial is a fascinating case study in jury psychology. It highlights the profound limitation of pure science within a human justice system.
It's too dry for them.
You can present all the statistical probabilities in the world, you can explain cellular biology for days, but if a juror cannot emotionally connect those sterile statistics to the visceral reality of a murder, their brain will default to doubt.
They just can't picture it.
The human mind deeply struggles to conceptualize a vibrant, living mother of three being reduced to 60 bone chips. It sounds like science fiction to them, not murder.
So if I'm on that jury, I'm hearing cuticles and medullas, but I'm not feeling the human loss. It's just words on a chart.
Precisely. The prosecution overloaded them with data, but failed to provide a narrative they could visually and emotionally anchor to.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The prosecution doesn't just throw their hands up and walk away.
No, they double down.
They go back to the drawing board for the second trial in March 1989, this time moved to Stamford, Connecticut.
Yeah.
And they completely pivot their strategy.
They realize their mistake.
They realize they can't just blind the jury with science. They need to tell a profoundly human story. So instead of leading with the bone density and the hair shafts, they shift a massive spotlight onto that one recovered fingertip.
The one with the painted fingernail.
Why was that the key?
It was a brilliant, albeit intensely grim, strategic shift. Think about the analogy you can use here. Science needs data, but humans need a story.
A story they can understand.
A painted fingernail isn't a statistic. It is undeniably, viscerally human. It represents a grooming habit. It represents a specific aesthetic choice made by a living person.
Right. Every single juror can look at a photo of a painted fingernail and immediately associate it with a living, breathing woman standing in front of her bathroom mirror, applying polish before a flight.
Exactly. It bridged the enormous gap between the sterile laboratory data and the horrific, bloody reality of what Richard Crafts actually did.
It brought her back into the room.
The fingernail proves a state of being, grooming, life, care. It legally and emotionally counteracted the defense's vague narrative of some mysterious accident.
You don't accidentally end up with a painted fingernail on the banks of a frozen river.
You certainly don't.
It totally changes the energy in the courtroom. That fingernail told the story of Helle Crafts. And the pivot worked.
It worked beautifully.
On November 21st, 1989, which, chillingly, is almost exactly 3 years to the day after Richard stood on that bridge in the blizzard, the jury comes back.
And it was fast this time.
They don't need 52 days this time. They deliberate for less than 10 hours. The verdict is guilty. Judge Robert Negro sentences Richard Crafts to 50 years in prison.
And with that swing of the gavel, the very definition of corpus delicti in American jurisprudence was permanently and fundamentally altered.
Explain how exactly. How did it change?
It officially affirmed that the body of the crime does not mean you must have a physical, intact corpse to prove murder.
So it's not literal anymore.
Corpus delicti simply means you must prove the substantial fact that a crime has been committed. This verdict proved that if the scientific trace evidence is robust enough and the circumstantial timeline is tight enough, science can legally replace the physical body in a court of law.
That's a huge shift.
It essentially removed the ultimate incentive for killers to meticulously destroy remains because it proved they could still be caught.
The shockwaves of that case are still being felt today. The legacy of this nightmare is vast, and it branches out in so many directions.
It really touches everything in forensics.
Let's look at the field of forensics first. Dr. Henry Lee skyrockets to national, even global fame after this. He goes on to work on the O.J. Simpson case, the John Benet Ramsey case. He founds an entire forensic institute.
The Crafts case was his ultimate proving ground.
It elevated the entire field of criminalistics, didn't it?
It did. Before this, trace evidence was often seen as supporting material, something nice to have alongside a confession or an eyewitness.
But not the main event.
After this case, crime scene investigators began looking at microscopic trace evidence as the primary foundation of a prosecution. It birthed the modern era of forensics.
And then there's the cultural impact, which, honestly, I struggle with a bit.
It's definitely a controversial legacy.
In 1996, the Coen brothers released the movie Fargo. It's a masterpiece of cinema. It wins Academy Awards, and arguably its most famous scene features a criminal out in the snow feeding a body into a wood chipper.
Everyone knows that scene.
Now, technically, the Coens say the movie is fiction, but that specific iconic visual horror, it was directly inspired by the relentless national news coverage of the Crafts case.
It is the ultimate double-edged sword of true crime entering the cultural zeitgeist.
How so? Sure.
The sheer mechanical audacity of Richard's crime made it unforgettable to the public. But pop culture has a habit of stripping away the profound tragedy of an event to leave only the spectacle behind.
Right. It becomes a joke.
The wood chipper became a dark comedy trope, completely divorced from the reality of a terrified mother of three who was murdered in her own sanctuary.
Which brings me to the reality of today. I want you, the listener, to really think about this for a second. Richard Crafts served over 30 years in prison.
Yes.
In all that time, he never once admitted guilt. He never showed an ounce of remorse. He maintained that emotional opacity to the very end.
True to his training.
And in 2020, at the age of 82, he was released on parole due to his age and declining health. He is out.
He's a free man.
How does it feel knowing a man so dangerously calculating, so utterly devoid of empathy, is walking free today? Helle's children, Andrew, Thomas, and Christina, have had to live with this dark cloud their entire lives.
It's unimaginable.
They issued these incredibly measured, controlled statements about his release, which just breaks my heart. Meanwhile, Helle's remains, those 60 tiny fragments, are buried in a Connecticut cemetery with a modest marker. It just says 1947 to 1986.
It is a profoundly bitter pill to swallow. Justice in the strict legal sense was served. He was convicted and imprisoned.
That doesn't feel like enough.
Emotional justice is rarely so clean or satisfying. However, if we synthesize the tragedy and the triumph here, we have to look at what Helle's actions ultimately accomplished.
She did so much to help them.
Helle Crafts, in her pragmatism, her bravery, and her incredible foresight to document everything, ultimately protected future victims.
By changing the system.
By forcing the justice system and forensic science to evolve to catch her killer, she ensured that the killers who come after her husband can no longer rely on simply destroying the evidence.
She closed the loophole.
She closed the very loophole that Richard arrogantly tried to exploit.
It's an incredible, enduring legacy. To wrap this all up, the chain of events that secured that justice is just staggering when you look back at it.
The domino effect.
It wasn't just Dr. Lee's brilliant science, though that was crucial. It was Helle's friend, Marie Thomas, remembering her words and refusing to let the missing person story stick.
Yes.
It was Joseph Hine, a snowplow driver, just doing his freezing route and bothering to speak up about something weird he saw in his headlights.
It takes a village, really.
It was a forensic dentist, meticulously looking at the root structure of a single tooth. It was prosecutors refusing to give up after a devastating mistrial and finding a way to tell Helle's story.
A huge collective effort.
Every single time you see a modern cold case solved today by a microscopic drop of blood or a stray hair, you are looking at the direct legacy of Helle Crafts.
It is a testament to the power of collective effort in the face of absolute evil. But as an analyst, looking at the entire timeline, this raises an important question about the nature of how these cases are actually solved.
Your question.
We rightfully celebrate the science and the persistence, but we must also acknowledge the sheer, terrifying serendipity involved.
Exactly. And that serendipity is the thought I want to leave you with today. We've talked about the meticulous science, we've talked about the legal precedents, but look at the terrifying fragility of justice.
It hangs by a thread.
We can marvel at Dr. Lee's genius. We can applaud Helle's meticulous documentation of her husband's affairs. But think about the weather.
The snowstorm.
What if it hadn't snowed that night in November 1986? What if Joseph Hine had driven his plow down a different street at 4:00 a.m.?
It would be a completely different story.
Without that single random eyewitness tip putting Richard on that specific bridge at that specific time, would anyone have ever thought to search the muddy banks of the Housatonic River months later?
No, they wouldn't have.
Dr. Lee is a genius, but he wouldn't have known where to look. The chilling truth is, no matter how advanced our science gets, no matter how rigorous our laws become, you have to wonder how many meticulously planned perfect crimes actually succeed simply because the sky was clear.